You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Welcome to episode 18 of Ethnosynology. I'm your host, David Ian Howe, and this is Ethnosynology with David Ian Howe. I mess it up every time, but here I am. So this week, quick and easy, I just put out on my Instagram, if anybody has any questions for the podcast, I'll answer them because I do get quite a bit of questions. Some of them go on the Patreon. Some of them are in my, subscribers thing on Instagram, but a lot of times I'll just put like an AMA or a questions thing in the Instagram stories. And yeah, I did that the other day and got loads. So we got plenty to talk about. Let's start with the first one. Someone just says dogs as pack animals. And I would say most of my life, I thought pack animals meant like animals that live in packs, like dogs or like herds, like cows and stuff. I don't know why I thought that, but a pack animal meaning an animal that packs things, like that carries packs. So like a horse or a llama, and I guess goats in some places I've seen, and then cows and stuff like that. But llamas are your typical pack animal, I would imagine. Camels, I guess, by extent. Llamas are just camels. They're cousin to them. They're basically just like a line of camels from the Americas that stayed behind. Why I'm going on a tangent about the semantics of pack animals. But dogs as pack animals, yes, it is very common in the ethnographic record, at least in indigenous North America, for dogs to have carried packs, and that could be either as travois or as wearing backpacks or just like carrying things. And I guess by extent, dogs like fetching something is packing something, but if they're carrying it in their mouth. But yeah, I would argue that I shouldn't say it was like very common. I don't know what word I just used, but I do know, especially on the plains where you're very nomadic, dogs would have been using travois for sure, and then also packs. And I know in the Southeast they use packs. I think that came from a Cherokee source. I couldn't for the life of you tell you exactly where that came from, but I know the Cherokee are very well documented, and that would have came from them in the Southeast. So yeah, pack animals, and is ethnographic versions of this that I had pulled up earlier. In Andean societies, it probably pre-llama domestication, they may have used dogs, though I'm not sure exactly when dogs got to the Andes. I know it was a very hard time for dogs to get through the tropics down into South America, but I do know by the time of Pizarro, the Inca did have dogs, and they were places where they were eaten, they were places where they were pets, they were places just like everywhere else in the world. But yeah, there probably was evidence, probably was use of dogs there for that reason before llamas became super widespread, that I couldn't tell you that with a firm source at the moment, so don't go quote me on that. But Arctic and subarctic groups with the Inuit, the Yupik, and the Chukchi also relied on dog sledding, which I guess technically counts as packs, like they're carrying things either on their back harness-wise or are being used to pull sleds or sledges, and I guess you could also consider that a pack or a beast of burden in that sense. I don't know what the tier list of riding a horse versus a horse pulling a plow versus carrying a pack, where pack animal, I guess when it's wearing a pack, or like beast of burden comes in, but I don't know. Yeah, the Siberian Husky was bred to pull loads, so we know that for a fact. And then in Tibetan and Central Asian countries, in the Himalayas, dogs were used to carry fire bundles, or like wood bundles, stuff like that on the sides of their packs, and they were tied to their sides. I have seen photo evidence of that. I'll find that and put that here, but yes, I do remember hearing that or reading that when I was in grad school doing all this research. And then apparently dog carts were a thing in Russia and Eastern Europe, and also in Belgium, which Belgium is the Eastern Europe of Western Europe. I guess you could argue that's like parts of Italy, but I don't know how to get into the semantics of that one. But dog carts will pull things for milkmen. Apparently dogs pull little milk carts. Didn't know that. And then Russian peasants, particularly in Siberia, also used dogs in pulling sleds and carrying loads over long distances in winter. I think that's referring to Inuit people or indigenous North Russians. Yeah, okay, spending too long on that one. Again, I can't give you the only one I can give you a full source on is dogs carrying travois or travois in the plains, and that comes from Buffalo Bird Woman, and there's also tons of pictures of dogs carrying travois. And also when the horse got there, a lot of tribes called it the big dog or the big deer, but the ones that called it the big dog is because it pulled sleds. And there's also native cultures on the plains, I believe it's the Arapaho, I can't officially quote this based on the person I spoke with, but there's the dog time and the horse time. And that was like basically pre-contact and post-contact, dog time and horse time, because the horse is introduced. There's also the whole thing about whether horses were indigenous to the Americas or not. And there's 2 authors that have written books now saying that according to oral evidence and oral tradition, that horses have been in the Americas the whole time. And they weren't just brought by the Spanish. But I also, no offense to them, I chalk that up as I haven't seen any evidence of that in any facility, museum, or hole that I've dug in the country, and any database that I've seen of animal remains across the continent. And I would also chalk that up with pseudoscience. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. I can't prove that an oral history is wrong or right, but it seems to me that the evidence points to that's not the case, unless there was some weird holdout of horses in the middle of Idaho, according to this person. I don't know, but I can't, argue against pseudoscientists popping up on Joe Rogan talking about some things and then also say she has a point to that. I think the science doesn't say that. Sorry, went on a tangent there. More ancient and rare breeds, even if extinct. My favorite rare breed, I guess, is the Charolais Squintley. And it's not even that like rare, I guess. It's popularized with cocoa, and it's pretty common. Not too common in Mexico, but like obviously in Mexico more than in France, it's more common to see. But it's from Mexico. But yeah, the Charolais Squintley was bred. I think I've seen multiple different versions of this, but bred for food and then also bred for sacrificial purposes. But then they were also used as pets. So it just seems like in any culture, dogs are used for all sorts of things. Go figure, because they're a technology. And yeah, the Charolais Squintley, I can't remember the exact origin story of it, but I do know is the Aztec dog god, and he was Quetzalcoatl's brother. And it's an interesting story. All the gods got together and were like, hey, the sun, Huitzilopochtli is the sun god. And they tried to activate him or turn on the sun. And it required like a sacrifice to turn it on or to get it working. And they all just looked around and they were like, hey, Charolais, you should do it. And he was like, no. And then he hid in the plains and he hid in the water and the swamps. And when he hid in the water, he turned into a salamander. And that's why those salamanders are called axolotls. They're axolotes is what they're called. But yeah, that's because he took the form of that salamander to hide from his brother. I think it was, I'm misquoting the indigenous mythology here, but basically, yeah, they found him, yeeted him into the sun, and he had to sacrifice himself to, actually, I think he hid and somebody else volunteered to do it. I could be mistaken. There's a very trippy animated video of the Aztec mythology pantheon that you should check out. I'll link that here in the description and put it here in the videos. Very interesting. Yeah, the Popol Vuh, which is the Mayan one as well, is also very trippy. But yes, I obviously I feel terrible not being able to say for sure. But again, my focus is the dog aspect. It's not exactly on Aztec pantheon or Mexica religion. So sorry on that one. More ancient and rare breeds, though. I mean, there's like an archaic Shiba Inu in Japan that like was there with the Ainu or the Hamon in the Hamon period, and the Ainu did use it for a long time. Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but even Inu in Japanese is dog, which is like Shiba Inu, and she's like the Shiba dog. And then what is it? There's another really cool breed. A Greenland dog is cool. It's an indigenous breed, which I'll get to that question later. And then, yeah, the Basenji. I've only met one Basenji in my life. They're adorable, and they like don't bark. And also the dog that I knew that was a Basenji had to wear like a bonnet in the field because she like was allergic to the sun. I think that was a rare thing she had. I don't know if that was a Basenji thing, but just a cute little dog. Her name was Koya. Yeah, I can't off the top of my head think of any other like super cool rare breeds. Let's see. Any challenges when distinguishing the symbolic roles and utilitarian roles of dogs in your research? Yeah, it's the same with a human burial and a dog burial. Was this especially with, you can argue this with, I guess that's a good parallel, Neanderthals and dogs. A lot of Neanderthal burials, like it's argued, are they intentional, like burials with the thought of afterlife and, you know, symbolic ritual burial or not? Or was it just you had to bury grandma so hyenas didn't eat her or she didn't stink up the cave? I don't know. Evidence seems to point to they did have some kind of culture, though I know my professor, Dr. Kelly, is like a pretty staunch opponent of that. I think he has changed his mind in recent years based on some evidence. Basically, there's not enough, his argument being there's not enough like evidence for ritual Neanderthal burial in the way that we would define a modern Homo sapien ritual burial, if that makes sense. Like it would be interpretation more so than just, okay, this is clearly symbolic. Like they buried it with points and ochre and things like that. So with dogs, on occasion, you do find them very well buried. And if they're in a flexed burial, especially in indigenous culture and in Native America, you do find flexed dog burials quite often. And I would say that is intentional ritual, whatever you want to call it. Like an intentional burial is what I would call that, with religion and circumstance behind it. The really old ones in the old world, like the 14,000-year-old dog at Bon Overcastle that's buried with two people. I can't remember the paper. It's been a decade since I read it. I'll have to read it again. Whether it was like they were super laid there intentionally or they were just all buried like in sloppily together, I don't recall. But then people argue that wasn't a dog. It was a wolf. But either way, it was buried with people. So that's like either a lupine animal is buried with a human. I do remember at a site I worked at for my field school in Nashville on the Cumberland River, there were dog bones all over the place in a midden, but there were also human bones there too. And they just tossed them in the midden. So whether that was ritual or not, I don't know. It seems like, I don't think they were eating the people. They might have been eating the dogs and throwing them in the refuse pile. I don't remember. I also don't know if I can speak on that fully, so I'll cut my mouth there. But yeah, nothing crazy. Just like it's sensitive stuff talking about native remains. Let's see. Someone said, "Who let the dogs out?" That would be the Baha Men. They wrote that song, a hit song from 2001, maybe. I'll find the year. I did learn recently that "Who Let the Dogs Out" is referring to unattractive women. Did not know that. The song was like number one for like years. And then they go, "Oh." It's weird. In hindsight, 2000s were a different time. Let's see. Use of canids in war. Were some war when an army with dogs won over other without? That person's name is a Latin name. Spanish, I believe. Of Spanish origin. I think their translate got fucked to hell. I don't know what they're trying to say. Use of canids in war. Were some war when an army with dogs won over other without? I guess he's saying maybe did dogs help in war? And some dogs helped win. Yes, they're famously the Spanish brought their war dogs to the siege of Tenochtitlan, and like they were these big mastiffs, and they had spiked collars, and they put like leather armor on them. It's pretty. I always want to say pretty. I'm just gonna say guys will see this and say hell yeah. The use of them is questionable, but like a dog with armor is always going to be a hell yeah to me. Did I think the siege of Tenochtitlan could have gone a little more peacefully? Sure. Do I think, how would I say this? The indigenous peoples of Mexico should have been wiped out the way they were? No, I think I wish they were still, they still are here. They're Latinos. Culture was stamped out and replaced with Catholicism and Latin, Spanish, Roman culture. So I'm getting into the weeds on that one and dicey. But I guess the point being, where I want to go with this is the Aztecs were also hated by everybody around them. And that's why when Cortez landed in Veracruz, he was like, "Hey, is there an empire here with gold? I heard about it." And they were like, "Yeah, it's that way. They suck." And then he was like, "You want to join me?" And they were like, "Yeah." And he used and bartered his way in using I don't actually know if it's a myth or not that he burned the boats. That seems like a mythy thing. I'll find that out. I do know that the governor of Cuba was like, "Hey, you need a charter to just explore Mexico and establish a fort there." And he was like, "I don't need that. I'm Cortez." And he was like, "That I don't know who you are. That doesn't make sense." So Cortez just went anyway and went and did it. Then Doña Maria is her name, which I like Malinche means traitor, but I can't remember her actual name. I'm going to put it here. Every time I post it, someone say her name, which I agree with. I should know her name. Can't remember. And it's debated, was she his unwilling partner or not, or is it just because she's trying to survive? I don't know. There's many accounts of her. I'd imagine it wasn't the most consensual thing. I'll leave it with that. But she did help Cortez translate with all of the indigenous peoples on the way to Mexico City, which was Tenochtitlan at the time, to the Mexican Empire. And she married him, gave him many children, that's how the book phrases it. I shouldn't say that. They had many children. I don't know if they were married. I don't know. She converted. We're not talking about dogs anymore at this point. I love this period of time. Not because I think that, again, what the conquistadors did was super cool, but it's also just, you know what? We're going to take a commercial break. We'll be right back talking about dogs. And we're back. So before I left, I was talking about the siege of Tenochtitlan. Yes, the Spaniards did use war dogs, according to the accounts that I read in that. And also, there's the whole thing of the Black Legend. Like, it gets complicated, like anything else. The Spanish, the British, the Portuguese, and the Dutch, and the Germans at some point, of course, the Russians also colonized the western part of North America, all hated each other. And the British would slander the Spanish and refer to them as basically Muslim. They're not, or like Arab, which the Spanish, of course, didn't like because they spent decades, centuries kicking the Arabs out. And we just refer to them as being like a little weirdos, and basically put all this propaganda out saying like how bad the Spanish treated the natives and X, Y, and Z, where in reality the Spanish were brutal with the natives, but they also permitted intermarriage. That's why there's a lot more indigenous people in South and Middle America or Mesoamerica than there are in North America. Disease. By the time Jamestown was around, most of them had died. And by the time 1700 came around, when, or let's say 15, 16, 1700, when Christian British families were coming over and colonizing the Atlantic coast, they came in family units, whereas the Spanish and the Portuguese came over as like second sons seeking fortune who were able to take wives. This is a whole other topic that I could go on forever, but I'm losing track of this here. But this is what I wanted to do with this episode, was just rant. But yes, I forget where I was going with that. Oh, sorry, the Black Legend. The dogs were, the Spanish did use dogs. De Soto famously fed people to dogs, according to the accounts that he wrote, I believe, if I remember correctly. But also the British would use stuff like that to be like, the Spanish are terrible people. So you have to look at this stuff with a critical lens, being like, yes, we're looking at it through a European Christian Catholic lens, learning about indigenous cultures that were written down. But then you also have to remember, like, the British also hated the Portuguese and the Spanish and then wrote terribly about them as well. And especially as an English-speaking person who reads English stuff, you get a lot of that filtered down into it. And, of course, this was 500, 600 years ago, so it's like, it's all very nuanced and complicated. Anyway, more on dogs. War dogs, Rome, Greece. We have 2 episodes on that with Dr. Elise Cannon here on Ethnocynology. You can check those out on ancient dogs in Greece and Rome, especially the second episode is about war dogs. Does anyone actually teach ethnocynology besides you? No. I've seen some accounts pop up that are trying to do it. That's fine. They can do it. But like ethnocynology as a brand and like the study was coined by Dr. Brian Cummins, and I messaged him and asked him if I could use it, and he was like, yeah, sure, it's an ology, it's not like a company. And then I made it a company. But yeah, it's no one actually teaches it in schools, which is why I don't have a PhD, because I don't want to go for just archaeology, and I don't want to go for zoology specifically. If someone did teach this, the closest person that does teach this is Dr. Angela Perry, though I don't think she teaches anymore. She was at Texas A&M and then left. I believe she does CRM now. I can't recall. I haven't talked to her in a minute, I haven't been updated on that in a minute. Actually, she probably told me a few weeks ago and I just forgot. Canids in war. Okay, next question. What are dogs? I'll keep this one brief. It's a good question. I don't think they're being facetious. Dogs are a domestic wolf, or we could just say, define domestic wolf. Dogs are a subspecies of wolf adapted to life among Homo sapiens. So to say that better, they are a wolf adapted to life among Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens sapiens. A wolf can be tamed, and then therefore it's still not a dog, but over many generations it can become a dog. Dmitry Belyaev proved that with the Soviet fox experiment. But then there's African wild dogs, which aren't dogs. They're Lycone pictus. They're their own genera of dog, canid-like thing. The problem is canis comes from cane, which is Latin for dog. And we call everything that's a wolf or dog-like looking dogs. So African wild dogs. And then there's the dog-like mammals, which is caniformia. So canis, caniformia. And then there's the cat-like animals, which are feliforms, which would be lions, civets, cats, hyenas, all of those things. All weasels, those are all cat-like. Whereas dog-like is bears, raccoons, dogs, wolves. And it depends on their snout. A longer snout, as in my lecture, means canid, and they're defined by their scent receptors and their non-retractable claws. And the only, I think, feliform that has non-retractable claws, and I could be wrong in quoting this, is the hyena, which is why it gets confusing. But anyway, dogs are a wolf adapted to life among Homo sapiens. That is my TM trademark brand definition of dog. Do with that what you will. Let's see. What other canids could we see being domesticated soon? E.g. domestic foxes, though fixed. Yeah, foxes has been proved they can be domesticated. Coyotes are just wild dogs to me. You can breed them into dogs. You can breed them with wolves. Foxes, I would have to say foxes is the answer. It's already been done. There's like designer foxes you can get that are bred or whatever. I don't condone it. And I hate people message me all the time on Instagram. You need to condone this or blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't need to do shit. You can pay your own attention. Mind your thing. Someone was like, why do you always share these problematic things about animal behavior? It's just a funny meme about a dog like crawling into a crate. Yeah, some people don't like crate training. That's fine. I'm going to go on a rant here. But just laugh. It's funny. If someone's like hitting a dog, yeah, yell at me. I wouldn't post that. But if I accidentally do, tell me. But crate training, prong collar, choke collar, like all that stuff, like everyone has their own interpretation of it. Again, I'm not a dog behaviorist. I'm not a vet. Not my thing. If it's funny, I'm going to share it. A dog being choked. But like a dog, I shared something the other day of dogs in a kennel all horsing around, and like this big dog in charge came in, which was like a scruffy looking dog from like Island of Dogs, that Wes Anderson movie. Just a mutt came in with a big mustache and just owned the place and even scared the shit out of a shepherd. And somebody was like, you really shouldn't share this. This is problematic and such a big following, blah, blah, blah. I don't like, yeah, I could be more responsible with everything that I do. I'm sorry. So sorry, that was a rant here, but that was the answer to domestic foxes. Sorry. Historical medical care for dogs. Not sure if you've covered that. Not a vet. I'm not going to go into it, but great question. I will say I did eat the farmer's dog every day for 30 days, and I have 6-pack abs. You can use code ethnosynology, code ethno, with the farmer's dog for that. That is a joke. I lost 40 pounds. I'm just kidding. Has there been studies on cultures who ate dogs and kept them as pets, e.g. Mesoamerica? So the person already answered their question. Yes. Dogs were eaten by every culture, it seems, until like 1980 and still today in some. The ritual mass culling of dogs in China obviously is an issue, and I try not to touch this, especially when I was on TikTok, because I didn't want to step on the CCP's toes, get them mad at me. And also it's just going to get flagged, and it's just the whole thing. But if a dog in indigenous society, there are ceremonies where they eat puppy, but that's done out of respect for the dog's sacrifice for humanity. It's like its own thing. And my friend that was an anthropologist that went and did that said that it was very stringy, and they like had joked we should have ate that one, but like they all were joking about it, but in the sense that they like understood the gravity. If we're eating a puppy, this is a ritual thing that we've done for centuries. But dogs, just like, people ate dogs in the Middle Ages. They ate dogs in Rome and Greece. You can see evidence of it. China, Japan, Korea, Africa, America, North America, South America, dogs are just consumed. And in places where you don't have food, that's the number one thing about dogs. They are an emergency food source. And that happened in Polynesia for sure. And I think I talked about this last week. Maybe they were asking me about that. I think I said this on the Ancient Anthologies episode, or the Stories from the Stone Age episode. I can't remember what I named it. But yes, Cook went to Polynesia, and every island he showed up on, they kept offering him dog, and he was like, no. And then eventually he was like, this is quite good, because it was out of respect. They were like, please eat this dog. Very common thing. But remember, pigs and chickens were more precious to them as food. Dogs weren't. So they were able to eat dogs ceremonially in that sense. And there probably was too many dogs around eating scraps, killing the other animals or something like that. I had to look into that, but I bet there was a ritual reason behind, or a cultural reason behind, why dogs were eaten the way they were in Polynesia. Maybe not your thing, but cat domestication. Yeah, this is a funny one. I had a friend message me, and she was like, I have a theory on why cats were domesticated. And I was like, why? And she was like, when we started farming, they were eating rats in our granaries. And I was just a dick and was like, that's like the general agreed upon consensus. And you didn't just come up with that. And she was like, but is it though? And I pulled out like a book I have on domestication, which is called, I have it over here. It's called Tamed. I get sent books all the time for me to read so I can write the little blurb on the back with my name. Full disclosure, one of them I read but I sent the wrong one in. So on the back of the book, it's the wrong one. But it was about domestication, so it wasn't wrong. But this one was called Tamed, and they just sent me this book to read. Haven't read through the full thing yet, but Tamed, From Wild to Domesticated, the 10 Animals and Plants That Changed Human History. And you'll notice on the cover here, for the viewers, but for the listeners, there is wheat, there's barley, there's rye, corn, millet, I believe, is on there. I can't identify vector graphics of plants, but I can tell the animals are ox and cows, horses, chickens, which would be jungle fowl, humans, and dogs. There's no cats on the cover. And then if you open up the book, the first one is dogs. The whole chapter, though, the whole lineup of the book is dogs, wheat, cattle, corn, potatoes, that's a potato, chickens, rice, horses, apples, and humans. Apples come from Asia. I learned that the other day. I thought they were like a medieval Europe thing. Further reading on page 371, no cats. And I looked into some other books, and cats are like never mentioned. And it's argued, are cats domesticated or not? I would argue yes, like a Siamese cat and the hairless cat, what are the Sphinx cat? Those are like pretty well defined breed looking things. I would imagine cats are domesticated. And I did in my lecture, I joked and said, cats aren't domesticated. They're a wild animal. And then this guy from the New York Times emailed me and he was like, hey, David, I love your lecture, but just want to say, and I think he was like being funny, but was just like, I have written several articles with researchers on why cats are domesticated, and sent me receipts. And I was like, he either really found this funny and wanted me to just read it for the next lecture so I could point to that he did that, or he was just like, hey, you're wrong, which I respected either way. It's kind of funny. I got a cease and desist essentially from the New York Times, which was fun. A reporter that has worked with them. Short answer, I don't know. But the leading theory, I would say, and my best guess, and based on things that I have read, my best educated, learned guess would be the Near East, Egypt or the Near East, and it's called the Felis catus, and then, or Felis sylvestris libica. Libica meaning like Libya, Middle East area. Those are wild cats, and then the actual house cat is Felis catus. And then I've seen Felis domesticus too, but Felis catus is the word. Let's see. What was the relationship between dogs and civilizations in the ancient Americas? Yeah, this is a loaded one. Dogs were everything. They were the only domestic animal for 7,000 years in the Americas until llamas and turkeys, guinea pigs, I guess by extinction. Guinea pigs are domesticated in the sense that like plants are, or like rabbits. They're like literally like just farmed. But like a domestic beast of burden animal would be the llama and the dog, or all we have or all they had in the Americas. And then the turkey was obviously for food, Muscovy ducks as well, and alpacas, obviously, but the camel-like animals from South American highlands were domesticated. But yeah, the dog was eaten. It was used to pull things. It was used for ritual purposes, used for hunting, mostly used as guardians, used for guarding, and were just everything in the Americas. And that was my whole thing in grad school, was reading all about this as much as I could. And there's the Handbook of the American Indian, which is like an old book, old in the sense that it's not PC in many ways, but like it's just a full, very well documented breadth of knowledge, and each one's a different volume, and it's like the plains, the woodlands, the South, and the Great Basin. They're awesome. I've seen some at like estate sales, and I've seen some at like old vintage bookstores. Nab those if you can find them. That's the Handbook of the American Indian. I'll put that here, and also Bureau of Ethnology reports. And those are from like really early, like 1910, like Boaz era archaeology and anthropology, where the Bureau of Ethnology went out to document whatever was left of indigenous culture, languages, cultures, customs, stories, everything, and documented quite a bit on that. And what I did for grad school was basically find that at the library. And if they didn't have the volume I wanted, I had the library order it, and I got it, or at least a PDF version of it. And then multiple times I had to pick up the physical copy and just Control F for dogs, dog, canid, foxes, coyotes, and just found everything I could. I would love to just sit with every one of those books again and find every instance, and just, that's what you do in grad school. And for your dissertation, basically anything you read, you stick it into a Zotero or EasyBib or whatever they use now. Zotero is what I used. It's a bibliography machine or like software where you put like the author, the ISBN, like all that stuff, the year, the date, the publisher, the chapters, and like you can click a button, and if you want it in APA style or at AAA or SAA style citations, it can spit that out for you. But also I can link the PDF, so I have every copy of every article that I've read in this database. I don't think I can legally share that, and I don't think I will, because then someone can just write a book on my stuff anyway. But if anybody wanted some sources, I would give them that, because that's like my life's work. And then I sound weird being like I'm hogging knowledge, but like that was a lot of work. So yes, that's what I would do. It would be my advice. And with that, let's take another quick commercial break. And we're back. The next question is, did your tattoo hurt? I assume they're referring to my most recent tattoo, because I have a story highlight on that. Yeah, this was a stick and poke, mostly done with a metal poke. But then he also, and I have here on screen, used a bone needle that Aaron Dieterwolf himself sharpened. And this looks like a deer's, yeah, it's a tibia. And then this is, or a metacarpal? It's a deer carpal, sorry. Doesn't matter, piece of a tibia. And this is stone. This is flint, like literal flint from one of the French caves where Danny lives, the guy who did my totemic tattoo on Instagram. I'll put that here. Or you go to ancestraltattooing.com, I think is it. Or just look up Danny Riday, Ridday, totemic tattoo. And yeah, this was all stick and poke. It's a memorial for Strider. I was going to put his ashes in it, but I was worried. I have a lot of health issues, and I was like, the last thing I need is an open wound with dirt in it that is ashes of a dead dog that had plastic burned with him too. So let's not. And then also, as I was wondering that, as I left the house, I forgot to bring the ashes. So it was just an easy answer. No, let's not put them in. But if I get it touched up, I'll throw some Strider's ashes in it. Also, fun fact, thank you for everyone who donated to Strider's memorial. I used that money to put some away for the display, but also used some of it to buy the urn from Egypt of Anubis to put him in. But they sent me the wrong one. And then they're like, it's too expensive to send it back, so just keep it. Here's a refund. So I might buy the other one, the one I wanted, or have someone custom. If anybody can custom make, this is stone from Egypt. If anybody can custom make a big urn that can fit my large German Shepherd's ashes in it, please let me know. Even if it was ceramic, that'd be cool. But I liked it because it was from Egypt. This is pretty cool. It looks like How to Train Your Dragon. Anyway, I don't love it, but it's what they sent me. Yes, his ashes were going to go in it. But yes, it. I think I talked about this in the Nashville episode, which was audio only, by the way. Some of these will be audio only. And that is episode, I want to say 10 and 11 or 11 and 12. I want to say 11 and 12, where he did it. And it was like it was the least painful tattoo I ever had. Though what did hurt was the bone needle, because it's bigger than the metal needle and like bigger than a regular tattooing needle. And this hurt, and I could hear like my skin, because it's like poking into your skin and pulling, and then like every time it came off, and I could hear that in my head, which was freaky. And that kind of hurt because it was like a big hole, but the way it looks is incredible. And that guy is literally, he was like, I don't know like what I am. And I was like, dude, you're like an artist. If there's everyone, it's like, I'm an artist. And like, I've said that too, but like this guy, I'm like, dude, you are a literal artist. And like, he's really good at it. So yeah, that's that tattoo. And I'll put that close to the camera here. This was the bone needle, the bone poke they used for my arm. Super cool. All right. Could we have dogs that live to 50 years old if we bred them better since the beginning? That's a question I can't even begin to even claim to know an answer to. Let's go with no. I don't know. Great question. I just don't want to spend time on it because I'd just be talking out my ass. Okay. Do there be bone arrowheads, and why are we still finding so many? Is it 'cause Wyoming? I love arrowheads, and I know folks good at finding them. I'm not, but I find them interesting. Also, you only have so many characters on these little Instagram story question things, so I'm sure that was probably a much more grammatically correct sentence. He's just fitting. Well done, cleverly putting everything in there. Do there be bone arrowheads, and why are we still finding so many? Is it 'cause Wyoming? I love arrowheads, and I know folks good at finding them. I'm not, but I find them interesting. Yeah, man, it's why I came to Wyoming. Wyoming's like the Jurassic Park of archaeology. Like, it has every era, from Paleo-Indian to cowboys to World War II sites now, because there's a base they trained out here at Vita Vu, I believe I don't remember what the training was, but there's a little bunker thing out here. And then now, like, the missile silos that are out here are like decommissioned. Those are technically artifacts or like historic places. But yeah, Paleo-Indians. And like from Paleo-Indian times to like early Archaic, Middle Archaic, late Archaic, Woodland, it's different out here, Woodland Mississippian, but like late prehistoric out here. And then the South, it's Woodland Mississippian. Out here, it's been a minute. But yeah, late prehistoric and then contact historic period. Arrowheads galore. And like the whole landscape is just, the whole state is essentially a lithic landscape, meaning like the whole state is just geologically rife with good stone for people to use and hunt, which is why Wyoming is such a good place for archaeology, because so many hunter-gatherers came here to use the stone and also hunt on the big, wide open plains. Like you think Ice Age hunters, like the Laprelle episode, which was episode 9, just late Paleolithic. I guess Paleoindians are technically like a Mesolithic, I guess is what they would be. It's the American Mesolithic, I would say. That's getting dicey. But Paleoindians were here using stone for that reason, and then through until the Shoshone and the Arapaho being here. And the Arapaho weren't always from here. They got pushed here, and they wandered around. The Shoshone also, everyone got pushed around once Europeans got here, and it's sad, but like people got pushed from like Minnesota and like Iowa way out to the plains before like even the Spanish or the French got out here and started establishing bases. So all of this turmoil was going on that they didn't even have contact with white people yet. But like all these other tribes were getting pushed and all these people got displaced. And then when white settlers got out to the West, it was like super chaotic. Because like now they have the horse, they changed from shield warfare to like horse warfare. They're doing mass bison kills with the horses, running them off cliffs. Horses fundamentally changed everything. Disease killed a lot of stuff. Corn was also brought in like relatively recently before that, by 500 years. Just a time of turmoil. And then on top of that, throw smallpox, guns, and white people on top of it. And again, not just because of the color of skin, but just like everything that brought with it. The onslaught of Western civilization being pushed onto the plains. And there's many films and TV shows and movies about the West and how crazy it was at this time. The Revenant being one of them. Just wild. So all that said, until from 13,000 years ago, however old Laprelle is the oldest site in Wyoming. I believe it's 1311. 11,300 or 13,300. Don't quote me. More than 10,000 years old. Through every era, every culture until then was using some kind of either spearhead, atlatl head, knife handle or knife blade, or arrowhead until trade points came in, and they would use wagon straps and like the metal like band that goes around barrels. I don't know what that's called. Like a barrel strap. There's probably a coopering word for that, but they would use that, make trade point, like metal points out of that. And then also spoons. They would like trade spoons because they could cold hammer those and then sharpen them into arrowheads. Yeah. So to answer your question, Wyoming is just full of arrowheads. And yes, cause Wyoming, I think was the question, is it because Wyoming's so arid and the ground's so hard and not acidic in many places that everything just stays on the surface where it was. In places like Laprelle, it's buried under meters and meters of sediment because it's off of a river. But in other places like BLM land that I surveyed up in like Riverton, just like on the res, there's just so much of a lithic landscape just still there that it was untouched since 7,000 years ago when someone left that point there. It's crazy. Reason some wolves are black is the next question. The answer to that is that comes from inbreeding or interbreeding with domestic dogs. There's no wild black wolves. Those are all have breeding with dogs or some kind of coyote dog hybrid. It comes from domestic dogs, which I learned on Meat Eater when I did that interview with them. I'll link that here, but that was Bear Grease. I think it was like episode 4. Might have been episode 9. It was like the first 10. I did an interview with Clay Newcomb of Meat Eater, which was awesome. Do a deep dive on Indigenous Australians' relationship with dingoes. That's a whole video, man. And that's another thing that like I'm going to step on toes by giving my official scientific opinions versus we live in an era of science is just like an opinion. Like someone's, no, I don't believe that. Here's what I think. And some of them are in government positions. Some of them have giant podcasts. Some of them are people that I know. I can't live in a world where like I'm living in it. I don't want to be like that dramatic, but if we want to live in that world and I have to call that out, I also can't just bend to vibes. like indigenous people in Australia would be like, the dingo's been here since forever, according to our stories. And I'm like, that's fine. Like you can believe that. We have a story in Rome where people suckled off of a wolf and became the emperors. They founded Rome. They didn't become the emperors of Rome. I don't know if that's true. Doesn't seem to be true to me. I haven't seen scientific evidence of human babies suckling off of a wolf mother's teat. That's getting into the weeds, but also I have seen scientific evidence of the dingo arriving in Australia with people when they arrived there after dogs were domesticated around 10,000 years ago, and they were brought down into Australia about that time, and the oldest dingo remains being about 4,000 years old. Now, if your ancestral teachings tell you that they've been there forever, I can't argue that because I wasn't there. I can't say yes or no. You're right on that. However, I can tell you that overwhelming scientific evidence, much like the horse in the Americas, does say that's not correct. That's not to say that you're wrong, just to saying that the science doesn't line up with that, if that makes sense. I guess there's a difference between incorrect and wrong. I don't know. See, now I'm pandering. Like, I don't want to be mean, but I can't fight science denial in some ways and then fight it and not fight it that way, because if that makes sense. And like, it's a weird place to be in, and I'm trying to be as genuine and generous as I can with that. But I would love to get like an Aboriginal Australian person that knows dingoes well to talk about it, which might actually be in the works in the next few weeks. I might be going to Australia. I don't know that yet. I'll find out. Anyway, sorry if that was offensive to some people, but prove me wrong. Prove the multitudes of scientific volumes wrong. Do dogs talk to other dog-like animals the same as they talk to other dogs? That's a good question. I actually don't know. And that falls into dog behavior and behavior stuff. I'm not a zoologist. I don't know that. I know more of like how humans interact with wolves on a landscape and how interact with dogs. That's a good question. I don't know. I do know there's body language and stuff. Dogs interact with other dogs differently. Like when they do that weird, like almost going to bite each other dance when they meet a new dog and their tails wag and they sniff each other's butts. That's communication. That's talking. They don't necessarily sniff your butt the same way, though they do. Yeah. I don't know. Someone also pointed out to me recently, like dogs, this was a few years ago, not recently, why they always gun for your crotch. And I have synesthesia, which means like some of my like senses kind of like blend together. Sometimes if I hear the name of a color, I'll like taste shit. If somebody says like orange, like obviously you're going to taste orange. Hang on. Because it's the same word in English. But yeah, like I have weird, some of your wires get crossed or whatever. And smells have like textures and like nouns to, I'm not going to go into it. It's weird. Well, if you were a dog and you saw smells as like clouds around your body, your armpits, your mouth, obviously your armpit, your asshole, and your genitals would have a big cloud that dogs, like if they were to look at you, all they would see is a cartoon when they get angry and like a puff of smoke comes out of their head. They would see that emanating from your genitals just at all times of the day, which is why they gun for it. It's like, that's what they see and want to smell. Your armpits as well, which I find funny. And that framing it that way made things make a lot more sense to me. How people might have used dogs to help with different tasks. I got into that with the indigenous stuff, but I'm running out of time to do a full one. A lot of these are just personal ones about me. I don't have to go into that. You know what? We'll end it there. I hope I got to everybody's question. I hope so. I offered this the other day. If you have questions, put them on this YouTube video or this Spotify audio. Put the comments in the comments. What questions do you have that I could answer in another video like this? Maybe every 5 episodes I'll do one like this because I enjoyed this. I like ranting. If you want to submit a video question or like an audio question for me to play on the episode, you can join my Patreon, which is patreon.com/DavidIanHow, and I'd be happy to do that. I know every other Patreon does that, but there's a reason they do it. And then also I could start each episode off with one of those or end the episode with questions like that, which I do love these. So please do that. And not that I want your $5 on Patreon to do it, but also if it goes to Patreon, that will remind me to do it because I do get literal thousands of comments a day that I have to go through, not on YouTube, but like on Instagram, TikTok. It becomes overwhelming. I won't see it. But if you pay the $5, I'll get an email being like, hey, this person has a question, and I'll get to it. I'll fix my Patreon up too. But yeah, I think with that, we are out. Please be sure to rate and review the podcast. You listen on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you can find your podcast. You can find it here on YouTube. If you're watching YouTube, please hit the like button. That's YouTube's new thing. Likes used to not be a huge thing. Smash that like button. Now now it's big metric. So please hit the like button on every video of mine. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. And if you have people that you think might find this interesting, please share it. I just went to the field yesterday with Dr. Shield Chief Gover in his field school with Dr. Mackenzie Corey. It's KU and Washington State University had a joint field school. And I sat down with some of the students and they were like, oh my God, I know you. I follow you. And this one lady didn't know who I was. And she sat down with me and was just like, oh my God, you're the dog guy. I listened to your podcast. And I was like, yeah, thanks. You're the first person that's told me that wasn't my mom. So yeah, fun. So I do appreciate you guys listening. And if you like other archaeology podcasts or want to hear more archaeology podcasts, you can go to the APN and find a plethora of them. Dr. Shield Chief Govers is the Great Plains Archaeology Podcast. Behind the Trowel is a great one. That's Tasha's. And there's And My Trowel, I think, is the other one. T-Ray Time Travel. ADHD BC. There you go. That's a new one. And then the Archaeology Show, which is run by my producers, Rachel and Chris. You can watch that or listen to that, sorry. And what was the last thing I was going to say? I'm wearing my hoodie. I don't have cutoff hoodies like this. It's just hot in here because I had to turn the fan off to record this so it didn't interrupt the sound, and it's hot. So I have the tank top on. But yeah, you can get this on my website, davidianhowe.com/store. And I might start making like different things that aren't just my logo, and I'll do that. But yeah, davidianhowe.com/store. And if you're listening, there is a summer sale going on right now. So if you use InstaFriends, get, I think, 10% off. All right, there you go. All right, thank you.
The Archaeology Podcast Network is 10 years old this year. Our executive producer is Ashley Airy, our social media coordinator is Matilda Siebrecht, and our chief editor is Rachel Roden. The Archaeology Podcast Network was co-founded by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle in 2014 and is part of Cultural Media and DigTech LLC.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.